The sun is just beginning to crest over the distant hills, casting a long, golden glow across the 7 hills of Rome. It is the early morning of July 12th. In the year 64 AD, down in the valley, the great marble monuments and the bustling forums are starting to catch the light, looking majestic and timeless. But up here, in the Subura district, the light doesn't bring quite the same warmth. Here, the sun just reveals the stark reality of life for the working class. The air is already thick, heavy with a promise of scorching heat later in the day. High up on the 4th floor of a towering wooden structure, the silence of the night is being shattered. This is the Insula of Felicula, one of the many islands of apartment blocks that crowd the narrow streets of Rome. To look at it from the outside, it leans slightly to the left, looking like a stack of tired old books ready to topple over. It is 6 stories tall, built cheap and built fast. A beehive made of mud brick and timber, housing nearly 400 people in a space that was really meant for half that number. Inside a small room on the 4th floor, the day begins not with an alarm clock, but with the sounds of the city itself. A shout echoes from the street below, followed immediately by the rattle of a cart passing over uneven cobblestones. Then, closer by, comes the sound of a baby crying 3 doors down, and the heavy thud of boots running up the common staircase. Lucius opens his eyes. He is 32 years old, with dark circles etched deep under his eyes, evidence of many sleepless nights in this noisy place. He stares up at the rough wooden ceiling for a moment, just listening to the building wake up. He shifts his weight, and the straw mattress beneath him rustles loudly. It's a humble bed, stuffed with dry grass that has gone lumpy over the years. Beside him, Aurelia is still asleep. She is curled on her side, one hand resting protectively over the gentle swell of her belly. She is 28, and in just a few months, she will give birth to their 2nd child. Lucius smiles softly, watching her sleep for a brief second. In this chaotic city, she is his only peace. He carefully pulls the thin wool blanket up over her shoulder, trying not to disturb her rest. The room is small, incredibly small. If you stretched out your arms, you could almost touch both walls at the same time. It is about 12 square meters of living space. That is roughly the size of a modern parking spot. In this tiny box, they cook, they eat, they sleep, and they raise a family. There are no separate rooms, no privacy to speak of. A small clay lamp sits on a wooden stool next to a wax writing tablet that Lucius uses for his work. In the corner, there is a small shrine to the household gods, a tiny space carved out of the wall where they keep figurines of Lares and Penettes, watching over them. Lucius sits up slowly, his back cracking in protest. The air in the room is stale and smells of the night before old cooking oil, damp wool, and the sweat that seems to cling to everything in July. Even this early, the heat is starting to build. The walls, which are nearly a foot thick, soak up the sun all day and hold on to the heat like an oven. By noon, this room will feel like a sauna. But for now, there is a slight coolness that lingers in the shadows. He stands up and walks to the window. It is just a narrow slit in the wall, covered by a wooden shutter that doesn't quite close all the way. He pushes it open, and the sounds of Rome rush in to greet him. The Subura is never quiet. He leans out, looking down 4 stories to the street below. It looks like a river of people moving in every direction. He can see the bakers already at work, the smell of fresh bread drifting up, mixing with the sharp, tangy scent of a nearby fish sauce factory. It is a smell that you never really get used to, but it is the smell of home. Looking out from this height gives you a strange view of Rome. From down there, you are just another face in the crowd. But from up here, you can see the rooftops stretching out for miles, a sea of red tiles and wooden balconies. You can see the smoke rising from the public baths nearby. You can see the dust kicking up in the streets. It is a beautiful sight, really, a city full of life and energy. But it is also a terrifying view when you realize how fragile it all is. Lucius knows that if a fire starts in this district, the way these wooden buildings are packed together means it would swallow the whole neighborhood in hours. He turns away from the window and looks back at the room. This home costs a fortune. It might seem small, but in Rome, rent is the biggest expense for a family. 2,000 sesterces a year. It is a number that keeps Lucius awake at night. As a clerk and scribe for a minor magistrate, He earns about 4 or 5,000 sesterces a year. That means almost half of everything he makes goes straight to the landlord, just to keep this roof over their heads. And for that price, they don't even get running water. In Rome, water is the great divider. The rich have it piped directly into their homes, flowing through lead pipes into fountains and pools. The poor have to work for it. In Lucius's building, the landlord had cut the private water pipe last year to save money. He said the pressure was too low to reach the upper floors anyway. So now, everyone in the Insula of Felicula has to rely on the public fountains, or pay water carriers to bring it up the stairs. Lucius looks at the empty clay amphora sitting in the corner. It is large and heavy, designed to hold enough water for the day's drinking and cooking. He sighs. The walk down is easy enough, though the stairs are dark, steep, and often covered in things you don't want to step in. But the walk back up, carrying 20 kilos of water, is a torture. It is a climb of 150 steps, winding up a spiral staircase that is worn smooth by thousands of feet over the years. A soft moan comes from the bed. Aurelia is waking up. Lucius goes to her side immediately, kneeling on the hard floor. She blinks her eyes open, squinting against the dim light. "It's already morning?" she asks, her voice raspy. "Just barely," Lucius whispers, brushing a stray hair away from her face. "Go back to sleep. I'll get the water." She tries to sit up, struggling against the weight of the baby. "No, I'll help. I need to stretch my legs." "You need to rest," he says firmly but gently. "The heat is going to be bad today. The fewer times you have to climb those stairs, the better." Aurelia relents, sinking back into the mattress. She looks tired. The pregnancy has been hard on her. The heat makes everything worse. The midwife says the baby will come in late September, but Aurelia feels like she is carrying a stone. Lucius hates seeing her like this. He feels the weight of his failure to provide a better life. He dreams of a ground-floor apartment with a small courtyard, a place where she can sit in the shade and breathe fresh air. But dreams are expensive in Rome, and reality is harsh. He quietly gets dressed. His tunic is made of rough wool, scratchy against his skin, but it is sturdy. He puts on his caligae, the heavy leather sandals worn by so many in the city. He checks his belt pouch. 2 asses. That is all the money he has until he gets paid on the first of the month. It is just enough to buy a little bread, maybe some figs if the market is cheap today. But it is not enough to buy water from the private carriers. He picks up the heavy amphora. It is cool to the touch, the clay still holding a bit of the night's chill. He looks around the room one last time. He sees the wax tablet on the stool. It reminds him of his job. He is a scribe. He can read and write. In a city where 90 out of 100 people are illiterate, his mind is his most valuable tool. He spends his days copying legal documents and recording transactions, scratching away with a stylus on wax or dipping a reed into ink. It is tedious work, but it is dignified. He is not a laborer in the fields, nor is he a slave. He is a free citizen of Rome, and that counts for something. He walks to the door. The floorboards creak under his weight, a familiar sound that warns the neighbors someone is moving. He opens the door and steps out into the common hallway. The smell here is stronger, a mix of unwashed bodies and rotting food. The hallway is dark, the only light coming from a small opening in the roof that vents the smoke from the cooking fires below. Lucius steps carefully. There is no railing on the walkway here. The doors to other apartments line the narrow corridor, some open, some shut. He can hear a family arguing behind one door, the clash of pottery from another. He passes the communal latrine on his floor, a wooden seat over a chute that drops straight into the sewer or the street if the sewer is backed up. The smell wafts out, and Lucius holds his breath, quickening his pace. He reaches the top of the staircase. It is a vertical drop into the gloom. The stairs are narrow, designed for one person at a time. If you meet someone coming up, one of you has to press against the wall to let the other pass. The wood is old, gray, and weathered, and in some places you can see right through the gaps to the floor below. It is terrifying for anyone, but especially for Lucius, knowing he has a pregnant wife at home who has to navigate these steps. He starts his descent, down from the 4th to the 3rd floor. On the 3rd floor lives a weaver. Lucius can hear the rhythmic clacking of the loom already at work. The weaver is blind, yet he weaves the most beautiful tapestries. It is a reminder that everyone in this building is fighting their own battle. Down to the second floor. The second floor is where the Chinacula are, the slightly nicer apartments that rent for 3,000 sesterces. The hallway here is swept clean, and there is actually a small bronze lamp hanging on the wall. The people here have a bit more money, perhaps shop owners or successful foremen. They look down on the residents of the upper floors, literally and figuratively, down to the first floor, or the ground level. The atmosphere changes instantly here. It is loud, bright, and chaotic. The ground floor of the insula is lined with tabernae, little shops that open right out onto the street. There is a bakery, its door wide open, filling the air with the scent of fresh loaves. Next to it is a greengrocer, setting out baskets of olives and onions. There is a bar serving hot spiced wine and snacks to the early risers. Lucius steps out onto the Via Recta, the straight street that cuts through the Subura. The noise is overwhelming. Metal hammers ring out from a blacksmith's shop nearby. A fruit seller is shouting the prices of his grapes, his voice raspy and loud. A team of oxen pulls a heavy stone block through the street, the driver yelling at the animals to move faster. But Lucius ignores the noise. His eyes are fixed on the public fountain at the end of the block. It is a simple stone basin, fed by one of the aqueducts that bring water from the mountains miles away. It is the lifeblood of the neighborhood. Dozens of people are already lined up, their amphorae and buckets in hand. Women gossiping, children playing in the spill-off water, slaves waiting for their master's turn. Lucius takes a deep breath. The morning air is already starting to taste of dust. He tightens his grip on his amphora and steps into the flow of the crowd. He is small, not physically imposing, and he gets jostled by a large man carrying a sack of flour. Watch it. The man grunts. Lucius nods respectfully, keeping his head down. He has learned to survive by being invisible. He makes his way to the fountain. The water is clear and cold, a miracle of engineering that Rome is famous for. But as he gets closer to the front of the line, he notices something is wrong. The people are grumbling. The line isn't moving. There is a group of men standing near the spout, men who look bigger and rougher than the average citizen. They are blocking access to the water. In the heart of ancient Rome, amidst the grandeur of marble and the roar of the Colosseum, lived a stonemason named Lucius. His world was not one of emperors and senators, but of dust, sweat, and the heavy weight of stone. Yet his greatest burden was not the rock he carved, but the thirst of his beloved wife, Aurelia. Aurelia was with child, their first, and the summer heat was relentless, a suffocating blanket over the city. Every drop of water was precious, a luxury they could no longer afford. The city's aqueducts, marvels of engineering, were supposed to be a gift to the people, but the flow to their insula had been diverted. Now, a man named Cassius, a contractor with a heart as hard as the cobblestones, controlled the local supply. He sold water from his private cistern at prices that bled the poor dry. Each morning, Lucius would watch the line of desperate faces, clutching their few remaining coins, their hopes dwindling with every splash Cassius's men doled out. Lucius had tried to reason with him. "Cassius, my wife. She needs water. The child." He'd pleaded, his voice raspy from the dust and anxiety. Cassius had merely laughed, a cruel, grating sound. "Thirst is a great motivator, stonemason. Work harder. Or perhaps your wife should have chosen a wealthier husband." The words stung more than any whip. Lucius clenched his fists, the calluses on his palms digging into his skin. He was a craftsman, a builder of the very city that was now letting his family wither. Days turned into a week. Aurelia grew weaker, her lips chapped, her eyes losing their vibrant spark. Lucius's heart hammered with a desperate rhythm. He sold his best tools, the chisels his father had passed down to him, for a few days' worth of water. The coins felt like stones in his pocket, heavy with the sacrifice. But it wasn't a solution. It was merely a delay of the inevitable. One night, unable to sleep, Lucius walked the moonlit streets. His path took him past the construction site of a new public bath, a project he had once hoped to work on. He stopped, his gaze falling upon the discarded terracotta pipes lying in a heap. A thought, dangerous and daring, began to form in his mind. He was a stonemason. He understood how stone and water worked, the principles of pressure and flow. He knew the paths of the great aqueducts that snaked their way into the city. He remembered an old, forgotten service channel, part of an earlier aqueduct that had been sealed off decades ago. The city engineers had deemed it obsolete. But Lucius, in his youth, had explored those dark, damp tunnels with other boys. He remembered the faint, steady trickle of water that still echoed in the darkness, a ghost of the mighty river it once carried. It was a long shot, a madman's gamble. The channel could have collapsed. It could be completely dry. But it was a chance, and he was out of options. Armed with a small pickaxe and a flickering oil lamp, he slipped out of his apartment before dawn. He found the sealed entrance, hidden behind a crumbling wall in an alleyway. With the skill of a master, he chipped away at the old mortar and stone, his movements precise and quiet. The air grew damp and cool as he broke through. He lit his lamp and ventured into the darkness. The tunnel was narrow and slick with moss. The air was thick with the smell of earth and decay. He walked for what felt like miles, his heart pounding in his ears, his every sense on alert. And then he heard it. At first, it was just a whisper, but it grew into a steady, beautiful sound, the sound of flowing water. He rounded a bend and saw it a small, but clean and constant stream, trickling from a fissure in the ancient stone, a hidden spring deep beneath the city. Lucius fell to his knees, tears mixing with the cool water on his face. He drank deeply, the water tasting sweeter than any wine. He filled his waterskin and began the long journey back, his steps light, his spirit soaring. When he returned, the sun was just beginning to warm the rooftops. He knelt beside Aurelia and gently touched the waterskin to her lips. She drank, slowly at first, then with more urgency. A flicker of life returned to her eyes. She looked at him, her gaze filled with a question he couldn't yet answer. He didn't stop there. Lucius knew this was more than just a solution for his family. He worked secretly, night after night, using his skills to carefully lay a small, hidden pipe from the old channel, diverting a small but steady stream towards their neighborhood. He created a small, discreet fountain in a hidden courtyard, camouflaged as a simple stone basin. Soon, whispers spread through the insula. A miracle. A gift from the gods. People began to find the fountain, filling their jugs with the clean, free water. They didn't know where it came from, but they saw the life it brought back to their community. Children played in its spray, and mothers wept with relief. Lucius watched from the shadows, his heart full. He had not built a temple or a palace, but he had given his people the most vital gift of all. He hadn't defeated Cassius with force, but with ingenuity and a refusal to despair. In the quiet courage of one stonemason, the true spirit of Rome, the spirit of building, of community, of life, flowed once more. He turned away from the fountain, the heavy amphora still empty in his hand. It felt heavier now, burdened with his failure. He began to walk, not knowing where he was going, just needing to move away from the laughter and the splashing water. The street was a furnace. By this time, the sun was fully up, and the heat waves were shimmering off the white limestone pavement. It had to be at least 35 degrees Celsius, and the air was still. There was no breeze in the narrow streets of the Subura. The buildings were too close, blocking any wind that might have wandered down from the hills. As he walked, his sandals slapped against the hot stones. Every step felt like an effort. He passed the bakery again, but the smell of baking bread didn't make him hungry. It just reminded him of how dry his mouth was. He passed a bar where a group of men were drinking wine, and for a moment he had an urge to run in and steal a cup, just to wet his throat. But he pushed the thought away. He was a law-abiding man. He wasn't a thief. He decided to try a different avenue. There was a smaller fountain, usually reserved for washing clothes, in the next street over. It was a longer walk, but perhaps the contractors hadn't reached it yet. He turned a corner, slipping between a cart carrying charcoal and a group of tourists pointing at the tenement buildings. The air here was even worse, thick with the smell of smoke and unwashed bodies. He walked for 10 minutes, his tunic sticking to his back with sweat. He finally reached the spot where the washing fountain should have been. His heart leaped for a second. It was there, but as he got closer, his hope sank. It wasn't blocked by contractors, but it was dry. A bucket lay on its side in the basin, and a stray dog was licking at a wet spot on the stone, but the stream was dead. Perhaps the aqueduct flow was being diverted, or maybe the pipe was just broken. In Rome, maintenance was a luxury. "Are you looking for water?" a voice asked. Lucius looked up. An old man was sitting on a stool outside a shuttered shop, watching him with amused eyes. The man was repairing a fishing net, his fingers gnarled and twisted. "Yes," Lucius said. "For my wife. Won't find it here," the old man said, not looking up from his net. "The whole lower Subura is dry or bought out today. It's the way of the season. Too many people, not enough flow. What do I do?" Lucius asked, and he hated the sound of his own voice. It sounded weak. "We live on the 4th floor of Felicula." The old man stopped his work and looked at Lucius, really looked at him. He saw the clean hands, the ink stain on the thumb, the tired eyes. "4th floor? That's a climb," the old man said. "You know, in the old days, the landlords provided water. They had to. Augustus made sure of it. But these new men," he shook his head, "they only care about the rent." "Please," Lucius said, "is there any well? Any cistern?" "Nearest public cistern is 3 streets that way." The man pointed a bony finger toward the Celian hill. "But the line is 500 people long. You'll be standing there until noon. And by then, the water will be warm enough to make tea." Lucius looked in the direction the man pointed. He could see the crowd already gathering in the distance, a dark snake of people winding around the block. He looked back at the Insula of Felicula, rising like a cliff face in the distance. He looked at the sun, climbing higher, scorching the sky. He realized he couldn't wait in line for 4 hours. He had to get back to work soon, or he would lose his wages for the day. And Aurelia, if he didn't come back soon, she would worry. She might try to calm down herself. The thought of her, heavily pregnant, navigating those dark, steep stairs in this heat, terrified him. "Thank you," Lucius whispered to the old man. He turned and started the long walk back toward his building. The walk back felt like a march of shame. He passed the fountain again. The big contractor was still there, still shouting. The crowd was thinner now. The people who could pay had gotten their water. The people who couldn't had scattered. Lucius kept his head down, hiding his face, pulling the hood of his tunic up to shield himself from the stairs. He arrived at the base of the Insula of Felicula. He stood in the shadow of the building, looking up. The 4th floor seemed impossibly high. The windows glinted in the sun, like eyes looking down at him. He counted the windows. He knew exactly which one was his. He could almost see Aurelia standing there, looking for him. He gripped the handle of the empty amphora. The clay was rough against his palm. He thought about the climb. 150 steps. He had done it hundreds of times. But usually, the anticipation of the water, the cool reward waiting for him at the end of the climb, gave him energy. Today, there was no reward. Just an empty room, a thirsty wife, and his own failure. He felt a sudden wave of anger, not at the contractor, and not at the heat, but at himself. Why hadn't he saved more money? Why was he stuck on the 4th floor? Why was it so hard just to get a drink of water? He slammed his hand against the rough brick wall of the building. The skin on his knuckles scraped, a sharp stinging pain, but he didn't care. "Citizen Lucius?" The voice was soft, hesitant. Lucius jumped and turned around. It was young Marcus, the son of the baker on the ground floor. The boy was only 10 years old, his face smeared with flour. He was holding a small wooden cup. "Your wife," Marcus said, looking at the ground. "She asked me to look for you. She said you were gone a long time." Lucius knelt down, trying to hide his empty amphora behind his back. "Is she all right?" "She is fine," Marcus said. "She is worried. She sent you this." The boy held out the cup. It contained a small amount of watered wine, barely enough for a mouthful. Lucius looked at the cup. It was a gesture of pure kindness. Aurelia had given the boy their last bit of drink to find him. He felt a lump form in his throat, thick and painful. He took the cup. "Thank you, Marcus," he said. "Thank your mother for me. Are you coming up?" the boy asked. "Yes," Lucius lied. I found a different fountain. I'm going back to fill the jar. The boy looked skeptical, but he nodded. Be careful. The stairs on the 3rd floor are wet. Someone spilled a chamber pot. Lucius watched the boy run back into the bakery. He looked at the cup in his hand. He couldn't drink it. He poured a little onto his scraped knuckles, the wine stinging the raw skin, and then, with a heavy heart, he poured the rest into the dusty gutter. It was a waste, but he couldn't carry a tiny cup up 4 floors. He needed a full jar. He stood there for a long time, paralyzed by indecision. The noise of the street faded into the background, replaced by the pounding of his own heart. He felt trapped. The city was closing in on him. The buildings, the crowds, the heat, it was all a cage. He was a scribe, a man of words, and words were useless against the empty jar. He looked at his hand. The ink stain was still there, dark and permanent. You write for a living, he whispered to himself. You write other people's laws, other people's wills. You write down their debts and their dreams. But you can't write a single drop of water. The despair was cold, even in the baking heat. He felt a tear slide down his cheek, mixing with the sweat and the dust. He wiped it away angrily. He was exhausted. The physical weight of the heat was draining his strength. He sat down heavily on the curb, right there in the shadow of his home. He put his head in his hands, the empty amphora resting between his feet like a gravestone. He closed his eyes. He just wanted to sit there, to let the day pass, to hide from the reality of the stairs. He thought about staying there all day, just sitting on the curb until the sun went down and the temperature dropped. But he knew he couldn't. Aurelia was waiting. He opened his eyes. The world looked blurry through his tears. He blinked them away. That was when he heard it. The sound wasn't from the crowd, and it wasn't from the fountain. It was the rhythmic, heavy tramp of marching feet. It was the clank of metal on metal. It was a sound that commanded respect, even in the chaos of the Subura. Lucius turned his head. Coming down the street, clearing a path through the vendors and beggars, was a squad of the Asterisk Vigils Asterisk, the city's fire watch. They wore red tunics and carried axes and buckets. Their leader rode a horse, looking stern and important. The sight of them gave Lucius a strange feeling. The Vigils were the only authority the landlords and contractors really feared. They were the ones who inspected buildings for fire hazards. They were the ones who enforced the laws when the Asterisk Aediles Asterisk wouldn't. The patrol stopped right in front of the Insula of Felicula. The captain dismounted. He was a weathered man, with a scar running down his cheek. He looked up at the building, shaking his head. The Insula of Felicula, the captain said to his second-in-command. It's been 3 months since the last inspection. The ladder is broken. The stairs are rotting. This place is a death trap waiting for a spark. We have a list of complaints, sir, the second-in-command said, unrolling a scroll. People dumping trash on the lower floors, blocking the exits. Let's check the tenant ledger, the captain said. Make sure everyone is registered. If there are unregistered people living on the top floors, the landlord pays a fine. The captain snapped his fingers, and a soldier held out a heavy wax tablet and a stylus. The captain looked at it, squinting in the sunlight. This handwriting is terrible, the captain grumbled. I can't make heads or tails of this list of names. I need someone to read it out to me while I check the rooms. Lucius watched this scene unfold. He saw the captain's frustration. He saw the scroll, the wax tablet, the confusion. And then he saw the captain look around, scanning the faces on the street, looking for someone who could help. It was a spark. A tiny, flickering spark of hope. Lucius stood up. His legs were shaky. He wiped his face on his sleeve. He looked at his ink-stained hand. He looked at the water fountain, where the contractor was still laughing. He looked at the impossible stairs leading up to Aurelia. He took a deep breath. The air was hot, but his mind was suddenly clear. He realized he wasn't just a tired man with an empty jar. He was a scribe. And right now, a scribe was exactly what Rome needed. He didn't have the money the contractor wanted, but he had a skill that the captain needed. This wasn't about strength anymore. It was about wit. It was about using what you have to get what you need. He adjusted his tunic. He picked up his amphora. He walked toward the vigils, not with the shuffle of a beaten man, but with the stride of a citizen who had found a solution. Lucius took a deep breath, the hot air filling his lungs, and walked straight toward the squad of vigils. The captain was a tall man named Aulus, a veteran who had seen too many fires and too many corrupt landlords. He stood by his horse, wiping dust from his bronze breastplate, looking frustrated as he stared at a mess of wax tablets in his hand. A young soldier was hovering nearby, looking just as confused. "Stay here," Lucius told himself. "Do not look back at the fountain. Just look at the captain." He stopped a few feet away and cleared his throat. The captain looked up, his eyes narrowing instantly. He was used to beggars asking for favors, and he didn't have the patience for it today. "This is official business, citizen," Aulus grumbled, his voice deep and gravelly. "Step back unless your building is burning down." "My building is not burning, Captain," Lucius said, keeping his voice steady and respectful. "But I see you are having trouble with the tenant list. I am a clerk, a scribe. I can read that list for you faster than any of your men, and I can organize the names by floor." The captain paused. He looked down at the tablets, then back at Lucius. He saw the ink stain on Lucius's thumb, a mark of the trade that was hard to fake. He looked at the heavy amphora on the ground, but he didn't say anything about it. "You can read this chicken scratch?" Aulus asked, holding out the tablet. The previous inspector had handwriting like a drunken spider. "I can read it," Lucius said confidently. "And I can write down which units have unpaid rents or complaints against them. It will save you an hour of standing in this heat." Aulus raised an eyebrow. An hour saved in this weather was a tempting offer. He weighed the tablet in his hand, then handed it to Lucius. "All right, scribe. Let's see what you can do. But be quick about it. We have 3 more blocks to inspect before noon." Lucius took the tablet. It was worn and smooth in his hand, a familiar feeling that instantly calmed his nerves. He didn't just see messy wax. He saw a puzzle that needed solving. He began to read aloud, his voice cutting clearly through the noise of the street. "Ground floor. Tabernae of Flavius the baker, paid current. Unit 2, Gnaeus the cobbler, complaint of structural damage to the doorframe," Lucius read, his eyes darting across the wax. "First floor rear, Unit 4, 3 tenants registered, but the neighbors report 6 men living there. Possible overcrowding fine." The captain snapped his fingers at his second in command. "Did you hear that? Check Unit 4, and write that down." He looked at Lucius with newfound respect. "You have a good eye, scribe, and a clear voice." They moved quickly through the list. Lucius didn't just read, he interpreted. He organized the chaotic information into a clean, logical report. He pointed out the safety violations that mattered: blocked exits on the 3rd floor, piles of oily rags in the hallway, things that the soldiers might have missed in a rush. He felt a surge of pride. In the streets, he was just another poor man in a crowd, but here, with a stylus in his hand, he was an expert. He was useful. Within 20 minutes, the inspection report for the Insula of Felicula was complete. The captain was genuinely impressed. He rolled up his scroll and tucked it into his belt. "That is the best inspection report I've seen in months," Aulus admitted, scratching his beard. "Oh, you saved us a lot of trouble. We would have been here until the sun went down otherwise." Lucius handed back the tablet. His heart was pounding against his ribs. It was time to make the ask. He stood up straight, looking the captain in the eye. "Captain, I did not do this for money," Lucius said. "I live on the 4th floor. My wife is pregnant, and the fountains are blocked by private contractors. I have 2 asses in my pouch, but they want 4. I cannot carry empty water up those stairs today." The captain's expression hardened. He looked over at the fountain, where the contractor was still selling the public water. He shook his head in disgust. "I know that man. He pays his bribes, so my hands are tied on shutting him down. But I can take care of my own." Aulus turned to his horse. Strapped to the saddle was a large leather canteen, heavy and bulging. It was the vigil's own supply, filled with cool, clean water from the regiment's barracks, drawn from a deep, private well. "Take it," the captain said, unbuckling the canteen and tossing it to Lucius. Lucius caught it. It was heavy, much heavier than his empty amphora, but the weight felt wonderful. The leather was cold and damp with condensation. He could feel the chill of the water through the material. "But sir," Lucius stammered, "this is your supply for the day." "I have more," Aulus said, waving him off. "And my men are tough. We can last a few hours without a drink. Your wife needs it more. Go on, scribe. Get that water upstairs before the sun gets any higher." Lucius couldn't believe it. He wanted to hug the captain, but he settled for a deep, respectful bow. "Gracious, Captain Aulus, you have saved us today. Just keep those stairs clear," Aulus replied, turning back to his men. "Move out, to the next block." Lucius watched them march away, the rhythmic sound of their boots fading down the street. He looked at the canteen in his hands. It was his lifeline. He picked up his empty amphora and tucked it under his arm, but his focus was entirely on the leather canteen. He didn't look at the contractor at the fountain. He didn't look at the long line of people still waiting. He turned toward the insula and began the climb. The journey up was different now. Before, he had been dragging his feet, dreading every step. Now, he was fueled by adrenaline and hope. He entered the dark hallway on the ground floor. The smell was still there, but it didn't bother him. He navigated around a sleeping dog and started up the first flight of stairs. 1, he counted in his head. He passed the baker's son on the landing. The boy's eyes went wide when he saw the leather canteen. "Is that water?" Marcus whispered. The room was suffocatingly hot. The heat had built up like a pressure cooker inside the small space. Aurelia was lying on the bed, her face flushed, her breathing shallow. She looked up, her eyes dull and tired. "I used my writing to help him. He gave this to us. It is cold, Aurelia. It is real water." The color seemed to come back to her cheeks instantly. Her hand was cool and damp now. You saved us. You will face days where the fountain is blocked and the odds are stacked against you.